Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Happy Monday to all of you. I hope you're hanging in there with the smoke and the haze. And we're going to talk about these awful wildfires over on the eastern side of the state. Also coming up today, 3 dead, 6 injured in a shooting in Seattle over the weekend. And it didn't take long for politicians, for the police chief to trot out the same worn-out excuses we'll discuss. Also, the new chair of the state Republican Party joined us yesterday on Sundays with Subscribers. I want to play a clip of that interview, in particular, his discussion around the topic of ballot harvesting and how it is something that the party is going to lean into in the 2024 election. Also, later on, an update from the court, in the Wendi Traynor case. I went to the plea hearing in that case on Friday, and her family was given the legal equivalent of a middle finger. So we'll discuss all that and more coming up. But first, if you have not become a subscriber already, please do so. It's how we continue to do this show independently of our corporate overlords. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. It's just $5 a month. I do want to start with just an acknowledgement of what's happening on the other side of the state. I know so often we're focused on what's going on over here, and certainly I don't know if the smoke that's filling the air over here is coming from the wildfires over in Spokane, but we know that it has just been awful over there for folks in Spokane County, specifically the Medical Lake area. We also just heard this morning that a second person has been found dead as a result of these wildfires, so 2 total casualties. Hundreds of homes and buildings have been burned at this point. The fire around Medical Lake is about 12,000 acres. It's only 10% contained. It's one of the worst ones in terms of obviously the fatalities are awful, but when you look at the number of actual structures that have been burned, I don't know if this will end up being one of the worst ones our state has had. I've covered a lot of wildfires in my years here, and typically, thankfully, they consume these really vast areas where there's just not a lot of people, and this was not the case here, obviously. And so we're monitoring that. My heart and thoughts also go out to the firefighters and the first responders who are, I'm sure, working around the clock. That's just exhausting, difficult, dangerous work. And so certainly our thoughts are with everyone over on the eastern side of the state. I know that the governor flew over there over the weekend to assess the situation. I'm sure that is certainly welcome. And so we will be monitoring that situation as it develops. But again, a second fatality related to those fires over there in the Spokane County area. Okay, I do want to follow up, since we spent the vast majority of our show last week talking about the Wendi Traynor case. I want to tell you today about the absolutely absurd, rage-inducing plea hearing that happened in this case on Friday. So I did get a chance to go down to watch the plea hearing. Again, the case involves Wendi Traynor, who was murdered in cold blood when she was just 25 years old back in 2017 at her apartment in Milton. She was killed, shot to the back of the head by her estranged boyfriend who had stalked her across the country. And we knew was coming to court to plead guilty to second-degree murder in what was a sweetheart plea deal that prosecutors offered up for him, much to the family's objections. And that's why the family, they had retained a private attorney, Ann Bremner, pro bono, to work with them to bring attention to the case. And they just couldn't believe that prosecutors, despite their objections, would offer Joshua Ellis basically what would be the equivalent of about 7 years in prison. So he's been in jail, he's been behind bars since he was first arraigned in this case back in 2017. He was arrested just a few days after the crime. And if this plea deal at sentencing, if he gets exactly what the prosecution has promised, he will be out of prison by 2025 for shooting his estranged girlfriend in the back of the head. Out by 2025. The crime happened in 2017. Egregious by any standard. So in court, the prosecutor, Pierce County prosecutor Drew Swaim, who the family has said, has been empathetic, but at the end of the day, the prosecutor's office still gave Josh Ellis this plea deal. So anyway, Drew Swaim, before the judge decided if he was going to accept the terms of the plea deal, she spoke in court and she put on the record that the family was vehemently opposed to it.
What I can tell the court verbally right now, and what will be in my prosecutor's statement for the basis for filing the amended information, is that the family is diametrically opposed to the amendment. They are very upset with our office for agreeing to the amended charges, as well as the plea bargain and the sentencing recommendation, should we reach that place, the state will be making. The family is very frustrated about the lack of communication they believe in, their lack of involvement in this negotiated settlement.
Yeah, at the same time, we didn't hear a clear explanation in court from the prosecutor's office why they felt the need to offer Josh Ellis such a lenient plea. As we've talked about many times on the show already, there are no factual issues with the case. It's very cut and dry. He was already convicted at trial in 2019. He got off on a technicality. They could have easily brought him to trial again. The family would have preferred it. Instead, what? To get the case off their plate, to avoid, the racial undertones of having a black suspect in the case. It's incredibly bizarre. But anyway, the judge in the case, Andre Penalver, he's a 2021 Inslee appointee. Take that for what you want to take it for, but Inslee has been in office for 12 years, and so a lot of the judges are Inslee appointees. He, I will say, was sympathetic to the fact that the family was not consulted about the plea, but he said that he was going to accept it. Here's some of that.
This is a difficult decision because I think that our state statutes present a protected place for victims and their families in the criminal process, and that includes the right to be consulted with regard to any plea agreements. But it is limited to that, and that is in part because of the constitutional rights of the defendant to due process, which, as unfair as it may seem, does come first. So given that, I am going to accept the basis for the amended information presented by the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. We appreciate that. And to let you know as well, Mr. Ellis has family members and supporters here. So just so you know that there are people that care about him too and are also very concerned that justice be done.
Yeah, that voice you heard there at the end is Mary Kay High. She's the defense attorney for Joshua Ellis. I'm going to talk more about Mary Kay High coming up just momentarily. But I want to, before I get to the family's reaction, so what does all this mean for this case? So essentially the judge accepted that the plea could move forward. And so Joshua Ellis pleaded guilty in court on Friday to murder in the second degree. Now, the case was still scheduled for sentencing on October 20th. And this judge, as he noted to the court, and in any other case where a plea deal is reached, a judge has ultimate discretion. So it is possible that this judge could, at sentencing, say, I know that we're here based on a plea deal, however, I'm going to sentence you to something higher than the plea deal. So that is still possible, and I know the family is hopeful that that will happen. I'm not sure they're holding their breath because of how they've been kicked around by the criminal justice system this entire time, and I'm going to give you a couple more examples about this. But Wendy's whole family was there, I mean, a lot of them, and they spoke to us briefly after court. So your reaction to the judge's decision to accept that plea today?
Disappointing.
Extremely disappointed.
Very disappointing.
He sat there when he was asked, are you going to admit that you're guilty, or will you say guilty? And he actually hesitated, put his head down, and I thought, you got to be kidding me.
He wasn't
After
sure.
all of this?
He doesn't want to take responsibility.
Yeah, no, he's not.
Losing his right to vote?
Cowards don't.
Who cares? You
Yeah.
know, he doesn't care.
It took our 25-year-old daughter.
Left her for a week on the floor, decomposing. Came and went every single day, stepped over her, fed his dog, walked his dog, left her there, didn't call for anybody. And her dad and uncle had to go and find her laying there, traumatized, on the floor, decomposed. After, you can only imagine what that does to a body. It is. No, it is not right. And they want to cut his sentence in half? Really? No.
Yeah, so again, they know that the judge could, at the end of this on October 20th, say, no, he deserves more time than the prosecution has gifted him. I don't know if they believe or not that that's going to happen. But I really want to play for you two things. that to me show how little regard the criminal justice system as it operates today in our state has for victims and the family members of victims. So I'll paint this picture for you. So I would say there's 20 or so members of Wendi Traynor's family in there, including there's also some supporters like Brian Byerly, who was the original detective from Bonnie Lake on the case. And, you know, it's an emotional day for them. And you can imagine what they're going through. They're sitting there, they see the guy who took their Wendi away, and they know that he's going to get this just slap on the wrist. So the defense attorney in this case, Mary Kay High, I have been covering crime and justice in this state for 13 years. I have never seen a defense attorney treat the family of a victim so callously and so rudely. And look, I know it's the job of a defense attorney, a good defense attorney, to get the best possible outcome for their client. I get it. But I have seen very good defense attorneys do that without completely undermining the emotional distress that their client has caused someone. I don't know anything else about this woman, Mary Kay High, except she's been involved in some other high-profile cases. But I was stunned at the disregard that she showed for the victim's family. So again, imagine them all standing in court. I'm going to play, I've put a montage together of some of the things this defense attorney was saying throughout this hearing on Friday. When it came to, she didn't want the family to have an opportunity to speak, or the family's spokesperson, Ann Bremner, who is a private attorney working the case pro bono. She didn't want that. She also, when the case was set over for sentencing, took issue with, she's like, well, I'm going to play it, but I want to set it up for you. Are all 20 of them going to speak? You know, I don't think that we need to hear from all 20 family members. And so just with that context, I just want you to listen to the rudeness for no reason that this defense attorney employed while talking about Wendi Traynor's family, who was standing right behind her.
I am objecting to having Ms. Bremner or family members address the court at this time, at this proceeding. They've actually already weighed in with their thoughts for the court, with their emails and their victim impact statements. You know, I think for fairness to Mr. Ellis, his due process rights are not trumped by the family's desires. And, you know, the fact that they have the resources to hire an attorney, Ms. Bremner, doesn't change that calculus at all. I would say you do not need to hear from the family additionally. You have 2 letters and an email, and you can make your decision regarding the amended information without further statements to the court.
There was a little bit of an audible laugh when it was said the family had resources to hire me because I'm pro bono.
We've tried to accommodate the family at every turn of setting over dates for the plea, setting over dates for the sentencing. And Your Honor, if I may, Washington Constitution Article 1, Section 35 talks about a representative. It doesn't talk about making sure you accommodate 20 individuals to address the court, but rather a representative of the deceased or the victim. I know that routinely we will hear from several family members. I don't presume that even under the constitutional amendment that it means that 20 people get to address the court.
I mean, it's just like all of it completely unnecessary. So here she's like, oh, we've been bending over backward to accommodate the family. The family of a murder victim who your client killed. And she goes, oh, well, just because the family has the resources to hire an attorney doesn't mean that we need to hear from that attorney. The attorney is pro bono. Then she goes on, oh, at sentencing, do we really have to hear from 20 family members? Just one will suffice. What is wrong with you? How callous is that? And again, I get that you're trying to put your client in the best possible position to get the best possible outcome, but you can't do it with an ounce of care or concern for the fact that behind you is a mom without her daughter, a dad without his daughter, an aunt, an uncle, cousins without the person that they loved. Shame on you, truly shame on you. I was actually speaking to another journalist outside the courtroom, and they brought it up first. They're like, what was with the defense attorney? And I go, I don't know. I've never seen that. And there was one more thing I just wanted to play, which was, again, the proverbial middle finger to a family that has been beaten up and disrespected by the justice system ever since their loved one was killed in 2017. So in the courtroom were a couple family members of Josh Ellis, which is fine. You know, it's not their fault that their loved one killed someone. And I have no issue with them being there and advocating and saying, hey, we're here to support him. But so we're out in the hallway with me and a few other journalists. We're out in the hallway with Wendi Traynor's family, and we're in the middle of interviewing them, and the door to the courtroom is right there. And we knew that Josh Ellis's family was going to be coming out soon, so they opened the door, and so, you know, we all kind of like try to go off to one side to let them pass. And one of Josh Ellis's family members, under her breath, as she leaves, for no other reason than so the family heard it, said this.
I'm glad he'll be out soon.
I'm glad he'll be out soon. Talking to no one in particular, but wanting the family to hear it. I'm glad he'll be out soon. Wanting the family to know, yeah, our loved one who killed Wendi Traynor, who killed your 25-year-old, I'm glad he'll be out soon. That is a level of callousness that I think is encouraged by what just happened in the courtroom. At every stage in that plea hearing on Friday, everything was done for Joshua Ellis. Oh, we want to make sure that the sentencing is built around whether his family can show up. You know, even the fact that we couldn't film his face in court. The defense attorney made a motion to the court that we couldn't film his face, and the judge granted it, which is unprecedented. Everything was about him. So then you've got his family member high off the justice system, catering to them, walks out, and to the family of a grieving family says, I'm glad he'll be out soon. Under her breath, but loud enough for them to hear. Absurd. And I feel bad for the family of Wendi Traynor. How ridiculous. How ridiculous is that? So we'll see what happens on October 20th. I wanted to update you guys on what happened in court. I mean, it is one of many examples of how the criminal justice system is truly failing the people who it is supposed to serve. All right. If you didn't watch Sundays with Subscribers this week, we had a great one. I loved having Jim Walsh in. So Representative Jim Walsh, longtime lawmaker in Washington State, someone I'd never interviewed before, which I was sort of surprised by, but he was recently elected the chair of the Washington State Republican Party. And he's coming in and he has all these, I would say, very detailed plans to try to do better in 2024 than the party has in the past. And specifically, I wanted to play one clip from the interview with you, and it has to do with the issue of ballot harvesting and how under his leadership, he says, even though conservatives have been critical of it in the past, it is something that they are going to do. You know, there has been a reticence from Republicans to get on board with some of the tactics that Democrats use, like ballot harvesting. Are you interested in changing gears on some of that?
Well, it won't be changing gears for me, but it'll be changing gears for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What we call ballot harvesting, some people don't like that name.
Sure.
Okay, call it ballot collection, call it whatever you want. The process of getting in touch with people, making sure they've voted. If they haven't, reminding them to vote. If they need help with their ballot being delivered, go pick it up and deliver it for them, is entirely legal in Washington. Mm-hmm. In some states that is not legal. Here it is legal. And it is a necessary part of any campaign organization. There's been hesitation on the conservative side in this state because of media coverage of other states which prohibit by law that kind of activity, where it's done anyway, where people break the law and they ballot harvest. They collect signatures from people and deliver them in bundles to whatever. Here in our state, it's to the county auditor or the election office. In Washington, it's legal. You can do that. And to not do it because of a documentary film made about Arizona makes no sense in Washington. So in the 19th, we were doing it years ago. And you help people by taking their ballot, collecting it. Now, you don't fill it out for them.
And you don't know necessarily how they voted either.
Not necessarily, no. To actually fill the ballot out for them or to sign their name on it or any of that, that's not legal. That's fraud. Mm-hmm. But to help them, remind them it's due, go up to their place and pick it up and deliver it to the county auditor or put it in a ballot box is entirely legal. And well-run campaigns will do that. And And the Washington State Republican Party going forward is going to do it in an organized, disciplined, and professional way. We will find those places where conservative voters are not voting enough, where their turnout numbers are lower, and we will call them up or email them or text message them, and remind them the ballots are due, and if need be, go up to their place and get them and hand them in for them. Some people are concerned about election integrity issues there. The idea that in our state, as a 100% mail-in ballot state, there is what's called a broken chain of custody. That is, the apparatus of government does not have its hands on access to that ballot at every stage of the ballot life, from when it's filled out to when it's counted, concerns many people, and that's a fair concern. But the fact is we have a broken chain of custody on ballots for every ballot in this state. So to use that concern as an excuse to not help people vote and increase voter turnout, it's just counterproductive.
Yeah, and whether that broken chain of custody is the United States Postal Service or whether it's someone who's working on behalf of the state Republican Party to get extra ballots in, I guess I don't see the difference.
There's not. I mean, as far as election integrity goes, there's none.
You can check out that whole interview at undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. Again, Jim Walsh, I was really, I don't know, we and I actually chatted about this. I had this weird perception of him that he was sort of some fringe wacko. I don't know where it came from, but it's eroded over time as I've sort of watched his speeches on the floor of the House, et cetera. I mean, the man is wicked smart. And very detailed in the way he discusses these issues and what the Republican Party needs to do that it hasn't done in the past. So I highly recommend you go check that interview out. And by becoming a subscriber at undividedpod.com, you can watch all our wonderful interviews on Sundays with subscribers. All right, coming up next, 3 dead after a shooting in Seattle at a hookah lounge over the weekend. I'm sure you can guess who, not what, the mayor is blaming for all of it. So we'll have that coming up. But first, I've been talking about First Mark Insurance and the First Mark Challenge for some time on the podcast now, because one, it's a wonderful way to save money for something everybody needs, which is insurance. And two, you're not just saving money by, I don't know, getting some cheapo insurance plan or crap service from some major carrier. No, you get to work with a wonderful local company that doesn't charge you anything for their service. In particular, Mike and I did the First Mark Challenge, which is a way for people to, for free, see if First Mark Insurance is right for them. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark, and he talked to us about it.
We believe and we say that we will help 100% of the people that we work with. Okay. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of the people we work with are going to become First Mark clients, but we believe that we will actually help 100% of the people, whether that be stay with your current carrier, but let's modify your coverage a bit so you're better protected, or ultimately, hopefully come over to First Mark. We're going to put you with a different company and give you better coverage, right? So the challenge is really challenging individuals to give us an opportunity to prove that to them. That's really what the First Mark Challenge is.
Yeah, Mike and I gave them an opportunity to prove it to us. We ended up signing up. Now they're sponsors on the podcast, and we love hearing stories about people who have moved over to First Mark to be their insurance concierge, have better insurance, better coverage, better service, and they're saving money, which we know right now is absolutely critical for folks as the cost of living is through the roof. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. They work for you. All right, a deadly shooting in Seattle over the weekend, and politicians and even the police chief continue to put their focus on the wrong things. Let's talk about it. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. What the media is calling a mass shooting happened in Seattle over the weekend at a hookah lounge. Here's the article from Fox 13. 3 dead, 6 injured after shooting at South Seattle hookah lounge. Police now investigating. It happened a little before, I think it was like 4:30 in the morning, which is crazy, Sunday morning. So Mayor Bruce Harrell put out a statement. I could have told you like word for word. I probably could have written out what his statement would be before he even read it. I'll just read part of it. It's pretty long, but he says, no place in this country is free from the awful epidemic of gun violence, which once again reverberates here in Seattle, leaving at least 3 dead, another 6 injured, and countless family and neighbors to pick up the pieces in our beloved South Seattle community. My heart is with the victims and every person impacted. He went on to say mass shootings cannot be so commonplace, that they are an acceptable summer weekend activity. Well, Duh. Not for people at social gathering spaces, not for people at the park, not for anyone anywhere, even as SPD keeps up a rapid and record pace of recovering guns. 869 through July, there are still more illegal guns in the wrong hands that could be used to incite another tragedy like this one. He goes on to say SPD is investigating the shooting with haste. Before I comment on what's so wrong about what Mayor Bruce Harrell just said, Chief Adrian Diaz also spoke to the media following the shooting, and he had similar sentiments about the gun epidemic.
We are seeing more rounds being fired, and that is where the trauma, occurs. And that's really what we're also trying to figure out. How do we stop this? How do we make our communities, safer? And like I said, we're on a path to recover more guns than we've ever recovered. And which means that there's a lot of guns out there. And it seems like every incident that we're coming across, people are having a gun. Whether it's, whether it's drug related, whether it's conflict related, sometimes it's drive-by, sometimes it's road rage, sometimes it's domestic violence. But it seems like everybody is carrying a gun. And that is something that we've got to figure out how to address. We're seeing increase in road rage cases. So immediately when somebody is confronted, we're finding that conflict literally being pulling out a gun and being able to resolve it with a gun. And that is a concern. Is that related to COVID? I don't know. Have I had concerns that could be related because we've been so isolated from each other that we really have to build this level of social skills again? I do think that has a part to play in this.
Okay. The COVID thing, let's not even discuss it. I'm sure that was like part of the question. And there was all these drive-bys and people like, oh, we don't know how to talk to people anymore, so now we're just pulling out guns on the freeway and killing people. So look, a couple things. Let's just talk about this, politics aside, common sense. Do I agree with the notion that we need to make sure that guns aren't in the hands of criminals? Of course I do. Do I agree with the use of SPD resources to go out and to make sure that they are recovering stolen firearms, that they are recovering firearms that are in the hands of felons, etc.? Of course I do. Those are really important things. The only people who I want to have guns are people who are legally allowed to have guns. And every American is legally allowed to own a firearm until they're not, and until they have proven, be it by their criminal actions, that they cannot be trusted with a firearm. And so often that's the first point, right? Where law enforcement realizes like, hey, this person can't have a gun. It's when they commit a crime with a gun. And so here's my issue with where the mayor and where the police chief are focusing their sentiments on an inanimate object. We need to focus our sentiments on the person holding the inanimate object. And we need to make sure that there is follow through. And what do I mean by that? Well, we just discussed for the last 5 days on the show, the Wendi Traynor case, who was shot in the back of the head by her estranged boyfriend who'd stalked her across the country. And Josh Ellis had no criminal history. He was legally able to own and possess a firearm until the moment that he shot Wendi Traynor in the back of the head with it and then pled guilty to the crime on Friday, and he'll eventually be sentenced. And, we can sit here and talk about, oh, we need to make sure we get guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We need to recover stolen firearms. All of that's good. But is there follow through in the criminal justice system? We need to throw the book at every single person who commits a crime with a gun. I hear and see way more often conversations in Olympia, in Seattle, about gun control, about restricting the rights of law-abiding citizens to exercise their Second Amendment rights, of finding ways to make it more difficult for someone who has never committed a crime, who has never shown that they can't be trusted with a firearm, to obtain one. And I know that's because that's what's politically popular, that's what's politically palatable for Democrats who are in the majority. But when you preach, gun control, gun control, gun control, how can we limit or take guns away from people who've never done anything wrong with them? And then on the flip side, you have someone like Joshua Ellis, who shot his ex-girlfriend in the back of the head and killed her and might walk out of prison in 7 years, who prosecutors dropped a firearm enhancement of 60 months in a sweetheart plea deal. I have a really hard time taking politicians seriously when they talk about gun control, when that is the reality of what's happening in our state. You talk about it, you pontificate about it, you look at ways to limit gun control or guns for people who've never committed any crimes with them. And then you turn around and when someone is standing in a court of law charged with a violent felony for using a firearm, you say, that's okay. We'll drop that firearms enhancement. We'll plead this case down. We'll let you walk out of prison in 7 years. And you wonder why those people get out and they go back to doing exactly what they were doing before. If you truly care about gun violence, if you truly care about gun control, that's where I want to see that commitment first. That is common sense. That your commitment to decrease what you're calling gun violence must come first and foremost in the form of harsh, not even harsh, stiff and appropriate punishments for people who use guns in the commission of a crime. And until our state and our criminal justice system shows that that is a priority, all of that other stuff is white noise. All of that other stuff is performative politics. The mayor of Seattle is guilty of it. The vast majority of Democrats in Olympia are guilty of it. Bob Ferguson is guilty of it. Jay Inslee is guilty of it. And they do that at the expense of public safety. Again, that's not a political opinion. That is the reality of what is playing out in our state time and time again. It is incredibly, incredibly dangerous and destructive. So you have to decide, what do you care more about? Reducing quote-unquote gun violence or politics? That's the decision that you have to make. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action on this issue and so many others at future42.org. All right. We talked a lot during the pandemic about what was another simple truth. Kids were suffering. Kids were suffering from an educational perspective, and the numbers proved it. But now, the state superintendent of public instruction's office wants you to think that everything is just fine and the kids aren't behind at all. Let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. Oh, for the love. Now, I'm going to make a tease off the top here, Nicole. Hi, Nicole, by the way.
Hey, Brandi. Hi, Brandi.
Yeah, you got to turn your mic on first.
I'm multitasking.
We have a really good guest on the Sunday show.
Yes.
Do you want to tell people who it is?
Well, it is that Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Kruse is going to be on Sundays with subscribers this week. And Mr. Reichdahl, if you're watching, this subject's going to come up. so
Maybe.
Be prepared for it. Because, and I mean, so first of all, let's just talk about the trajectory here. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, school closures, and then people like, our friend Dory Monson, et cetera, just vilified for suggesting that it was more detrimental to kids to have the schools closed than to expose them to the risk of COVID, which for children who are healthy wasn't really a big deal.
Right?
Vilified for it. And then also
kill grandma, remember?
Right, in regard to not only like the lessened education because they're not in school and they're not learning as they should be learning, but also their mental health and well-being. It's like you got these kids away from their friends and they're not developing and all this stuff. So anyway, pretty shocked to see the Office of not shocked to see the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction put out this article. It's titled, How and Why the Pandemic Affected Washington Students. And it basically makes the case that they're not behind. They're just learned in different ways. Mm-hmm. They learned and grew in different ways. It says what we ended up with is students who are now completely calibrated a little bit differently. We need to calibrate to where they're at because they're not behind. They gained a lot during that time. It just wasn't what we traditionally would have taught. I'm like, wow.
Like math, science, reading.
Is that just that is like government speak at its finest. Like, they're not behind. They didn't suffer. They're just different. They're just changed. And I will note, on the test scores and our friends over at, was this from?
Washington
Policy Center. They posted the actual statistics of what should we care about in schools. It's education, right? And educational standards. And I'm not saying that kids didn't learn some valuable life lessons during the pandemic, but that wasn't really the job of OSBI to teach them those things. So anyway, you see, if you're watching on the podcast, First of all, our state test scores were always bad. They continue to be very bad. But then there was a dip down to nothing because they stopped like judging kids based on those during the pandemic. But right now, they're not even close. I mean, they're still terrible, but like 51% in English, only, let's see.
And that's passing. So only 50% are passing.
Yeah, are meeting those standards right now in English, 38% in math. So both of those about 10% below pre-pandemic test scores, which I would argue were also bad.
Right.
Because when you're at 60% in English and 49% in math pre-pandemic, like you can't blame COVID for those. But now they're even lower. And so this whole article and it's like a Medium post, so it's basically just the government uses this site to post propaganda, basically. But it goes on to talk all about like the emotional changes that these kids underwent during COVID and how they need to now, change how they're operating in schools, whether it's counselors or whatever, to adapt to the social, emotional changes that kids underwent during the pandemic. Changes that you denied as a government for years were going to be a problem. How many things have we had where people were vilified for saying what was obvious, what was common sense, like, hey, this is going to have some detrimental emotional impacts on kids. No, it's not. No, it's not. And then now it's like, hey, this had some detrimental emotional impacts on kids. And now we need to recalibrate how we deal with kids. Like, yeah, we could have told you that. But I just love how they're not behind. It's just a new normal. Well, if your new normal is less than 50% of kids are meeting math and reading standards, then that's a terrible new normal.
If they're all behind, none of them are behind.
Yeah, there was who was that? The head of the teachers union?
WIA.
It was on with you and
Dory.
Dory.
It was with Dory. It was he said if all the kids are behind, then no one's behind.
Because Dory said, are they behind? He said, well, no, because they're all behind. So technically, it's not just a group of them. No, they weren't all behind. The private schools that actually let their kids come to school, etc. Those kids are doing just fine, I guarantee you. Absolutely unbelievable. The stuff that they try to convince us of. Like, we've been there, done that. I don't believe anything you say anymore.
Well, the other thing that's frustrating is you're obviously not learning from this experience. Like, tell us that you've learned from this experience. So the next time, God forbid, there's a pandemic and, maybe smoke is in the air and you want the kids to stay home. Like, tell us that you've got this under control and you're figuring out how to handle these things so the next time it is not handled this way and the kids aren't suffering.
Well, look, they knew that what they were being warned about was true. Right. Because imagine how dim you would have to be not to. Right. Imagine how dim you would have to be to truly believe that you could take kids out of school on and off for 2 years and it wouldn't impact their education and it wouldn't impact their social and behavioral health. Right. Of course it would. Everybody with a lick of common sense knew it would. They knew it would too, but it wasn't the politically popular thing to say. And they certainly weren't going to go against what the governor was doing and what the governor was messaging. So they'd rather lie and then slowly try to unwind that lie in a way that people won't notice. But we notice, okay? We notice. So anyway, Chris Reichdahl will be on the show. I think there's going to have
these, the repercussions of this, I think, are going to be pretty significant down the line, 5-10 years, when we don't have doctors anymore, because no kids have been motivated enough to go to school to become doctors. Yep. I was talking to a doctor about that the other day. He's like, his kid was going to become a doctor, and then he's like, I can make more money doing tech.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that's really scary that there's not going to be a lot of motivation, and they're going to be like, I can just do tech. But eventually, I feel like those jobs will lessen at some point, the either the pay or the number of them. But regardless, I think there's going to be consequences down the line, and it's not going to be gun violence, because gun violence was a problem before. It's still a problem. It's more of a problem because of the way you deal with these things. Yeah. But yeah, I think that there are going to be things that are COVID's fault, but it's not COVID. It's the way certain politicians handled COVID.
Yeah, and at this stage, it's cry wolf with COVID, because you blamed everything on COVID. And so when you blame everything on COVID, then you can blame nothing on COVID. I mean, downtown, it looks like crap because of COVID. All the windows are boarded up because of COVID.
People are doing drugs because of COVID.
We'll be in 2045, and they'll be like, well, remember the pandemic? This is just ridiculous stuff. So this Sunday, again, Sundays with subscribers, Chris Reichdahl, the superintendent of public instruction, is going to join us. If you want to watch that interview, sign up today, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. We also have an option for a free 7-day trial if you'd like to just check it out for a week before you subscribe. And I will give credit to Chris Reichdahl. He always says yes.
Yes.
He really always says yes, and we've been so critical of the Olympia School District, of political and social agendas being forced on kids. We have a story coming up in Sanity Check today about some wild stuff in the Bellingham School District. He knows we're going to ask about all that. I give the man a lot of credit for coming on and talking about it. So, I mean, maybe he'll...
Well, let's make sure he answers all the questions.
Well, yeah, but
too.
showing up in and of itself in today's political atmosphere
True.
where there are so many cowards who won't even return our emails, showing up
That's true.
is good. But
And to be
yes, we'll
clear-
see how the question and answer session goes.
Yeah, and just so, because you just teased this, I should say, like, we're not, he won't come on and comment on specific teacher situations like we've talked about in the Olympia School District, but overall, generally, sending kids back to school and some of the
Yes.
common topics that people are concerned about right
Right.
now, he's going to talk about.
Yeah, and I don't expect him to like comment on what's happening with a specific teacher in a specific school district. But I mean, we won't ask him, but we'll find out. I'm just kidding.
It's more
So
the
anyway,
policy, right? Because
it
we
is.
discuss policy on that
It
topic.
is.
So he'll comment on policy.
I look forward to it. It's going to be great. All right, where are we at in the show today? Just did, just did Unbelievable.
Wes Jones.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. I was like, meh. Okay, coming up next, the first Republican presidential debate is this week, but Donald Trump has other plans. Fascinating plans. We'll talk about that coming up. But first, we've been talking about Sell with Wes, wonderful real estate agent in our area, Wes Jones, just an awesome guy. I follow him on Instagram. He's quite an interesting guy. Cute family.
Fun.
Love it. I'm always off the rails.
fun.
But we've been talking specifically about something that I think is really unique to him as a real estate agent in our area, and that's their Listing Boost concierge service. Where if you got to sell your house and you're like, I got to do things to it so I get a good price, but I don't have the time, I don't have the money. Well, Wes Jones can step up and help. He did that for Susan in Federal Way, who sold her home there after 25 years.
I knew I had to paint. I knew I needed to get new flooring. I needed to get new lighting. I told him up front that I was very interested, that I did not have the time or the finances to do what needed to be done. And he immediately jumped in with, well, I do. Work started immediately. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, they had landscaping done. They had all the painting done. The new floors were put in. All the lighting was put in. It just was all so fast. And the rest is history. It was on the market for 7 days. I was able to get well over listing price.
To be specific, Susan got 20 offers, sold it for 15% over list price, and ended up getting $200,000 more than an investor offered her before the renovations. Check that out. And so had Susan, she said she'd called a couple other real estate agents about her listing, never even got a call back, called Wes Jones, he called back right away, and had she not worked with him with the Listing Boost concierge service, she would be out of her home with $200,000 less. She was just going to sell it to a guy who wanted to flip it. So it's great. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. Okay, let's step outside of Washington State. There's debates this week. I love a good debate. Although the moderators usually suck. Can I say that?
They haven't been good.
They haven't been good.
Mm-mm.
I like it when they kind of, they give them a little bit of leeway to go, interact with each other, and it's not so stilted. But then usually candidates take advantage of it, and then it's a whole mess, like it was with Trump Biden. But anyway, so the big news, I guess, about the debates this week is that Trump's not going to participate, which we had long suspected. However, now we know what he's going to be doing. Tucker Carlson. I gotta give him credit for this. That's kind of genius. According to the Washington Post, Trump to release taped interview with Tucker Carlson, skipping GOP debates. Of course, Tucker left Fox. He now does his independent show that he posts to X, and he is going to be dropping an interview with Donald Trump at the same time that the GOP debate is happening. And so, of course, the question is, all right, how many people watch that versus watching the debate live? Do the ratings suffer, etc.? Does Trump need to be on stage? If he isn't on stage, is he giving other candidates a chance to shine, etc.? I don't think it particularly matters. I'm going to be honest. I think that until the Trump saga is sorted out, like, is he going to be in jail or not? Is he going to be convicted or not? I think he's going to be the front runner. And I just don't see that changing. I don't see at this point any drastic thing that would change that. And so what I think is happening is they're all jockeying for who's going to be in that second position if Trump goes to jail. Like, they're like, okay, I want to be like in second so that if he goes to jail, then I'm the natural person who's going to pick up after that. So whatever. There was some interesting CBS News polling about all of this and where things stand. Trump's polling numbers have never been better. I mean, in this whole cycle. So CBS asked, and this was of likely GOP primary voters, if the 2024 Republican nomination were today, who would you vote for? 62% said Trump. 16% said Ron DeSantis. Remember when they were like neck and neck?
It's crazy.
Oh. 7% said Ramaswamy. 5 Pence, 3 Scott, 2 Haley, and then everybody else is just
Doesn't it make you feel like we're in this corner where we don't know what's going on in the rest of the country sometimes, because
so blue
this
here
seems, well, even in the red, it doesn't seem like we're this into Trump. So it just seems like another world sometimes.
Because I rarely talk to people, and I have a lot of Republican friends, and obviously we run in political circles. I rarely talk to people who are super psyched about Trump.
No.
And I agree, but I think Republicans here tend to be a little more moderate, or maybe like vocally, because it's like shamed. They're shamed. They don't talk. They're not as avid Trump supporters here because it's deemed as like, ooh, very taboo.
Right.
But I agree that even in Republican circles, they're like, oh, Trump.
Right. And I just think that it makes people feel like red doesn't have a chance in this case, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, if it's him, well then that's handing it to the Democrats. So,
well, I'll tell you right now that there's no way we elect a Republican governor if Trump's on the top of the ticket.
Right.
Absolutely no way. Dave Reichert has no chance. If Trump's at the top of the ticket, that's done. That's a death knell. Do you disagree?
I don't know. Things are so unpredictable right now. I would have said differently 6 months ago than I would have a year ago. So I don't know.
Well, we'll see what happens. But there were some other really fascinating and actually kind of sad and scary results of this CBS News poll. So this one doesn't surprise me, but it says, which concerns you more? And again, this was asked of likely GOP primary voters. Does it concern you more that the indictment against Trump is politically motivated? Trump tried to overturn the presidential election, or both? 77% said it concerns them more that the indictment is politically motivated. 8% said it concerns me more that Trump tried to overturn the presidential election, and 15% said both. I actually fall in the both category. I do think that you can believe that Trump's actions leading up to January 6th were inappropriate, while also believing that the indictment is politically motivated. But so this one is the one that really got me. Thank you for putting this one in here, Nicole. It says, this is among Trump voters. They were asked, okay, so they were given a series of people and said, do you feel what they tell you is true? Okay. Mm-hmm. Trump, 71% said yes. We feel what he tells us is true. Friends and family, 63% said we feel what they tell us is true. Conservative media figures, 56% said we feel what they tell us is true, which I'm actually, that sounds about right.
Right.
Religious leaders, we feel what they tell us is true. So 42% of Trump voters say, oh yeah, my pastor is telling me the truth. Versus
what are they lying about?
71% said, well, I could tell you a lot of things I think pastors are lying about.
Well, I know, but if you are religious and you have a pastor,
you have a religious leader.
Or a religious leader, and you think he's lying or she's lying to you.
58% of the time.
Don't you find a new one?
Oh my gosh, that is a fascinating poll. It really is. Yeah, that's such a good point. If you think your religious leader is lying to you 58% of the time, you should probably find a new one.
It doesn't mean you have to find a new religion.
Oh, no, I mean a new, new pastor. But also the 63% friends and family. That sounds about right.
Yeah, that one's probably the most truthful there.
Yeah,
I think.
Mine would be lowered. I don't think it's that I think they're intentionally lying to me. I think it's that they're very misled. Like they're watching MSNBC on repeat, and I just don't think that they're fully informed. Not that they're lying intentionally. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anyway, that is gold. I'm very curious what you guys think of the old 42% religious leaders truth-telling. Okay, we'll get your questions and comments from the stream coming up next, but first I've been talking about Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Did you notice? I have my ring back. Yes, I'm still engaged. My ring was resized down an entire size from a 7 to a 6 because I lost so much weight on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan since I got engaged. And if you know rings, a full size is a lot. To drop from a 7 to a 6, I was in there and she's like, well, did he surprise you with the ring and that's why it didn't fit? I'm like, no, it did fit. And now it doesn't because I lost so much weight on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, down 36 pounds on the program. It's worked really well for me. It's a very structured diet so that you kind of don't, you know what you can and cannot do. And I find that very easy. I like a little structure. I don't like room for error. And they give you a way to follow the program for life without feeling like you're on a lifelong diet, which I also need. Like I want to go out with my friends and have drinks and eat and all that stuff. So check it out, eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. You can just schedule a free 15-minute consultation and you don't have to commit to it. You can just talk to Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team about whether it's going to be a good fit for you, and then you can decide from there, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Okay, questions and comments from the live show today. On the Sunday show, let's see, on Jim Walsh, Robert Mitchell says, Jim just fights trolls on Twitter the same way they fight him. He's a very bright dude that weathers getting called a racist bigot every single day like a champ. Yeah, I do like, he's very different from the previous state party chair, Caleb Heimlich, who I really like Caleb. He's been on many times, not only this podcast, but when I was on TV. Really like Caleb. They're just a different personality, totally different personality. And I think the trajectory of the state Republican Party has been so downward that I think bringing somebody else in with fresh ideas, who has a little more of an aggressive response to some of the unhinged attacks against them, I don't think it could hurt. Let me put it that way. Leland Taylor with the super chat on the Wendi Traynor case. He says, I guess Pierce County wants a Gary Plouch 2.0. Who's that? I love how you put this comment in.
Sorry.
And with no explanation at all.
I'm still
for who that
pulling
is.
more comments too.
Who's Gary? I'll Google it. I can come back to it. An American known for publicly killing Jeff Duche, who had kidnapped, raped, and molested son Judy. Okay, I'll have to get back to this. I don't know what the reference is here on the super chat, Leland. Janelle says, the problem is that for any crime, it's categorized, no matter how gory, cruel, disgusting it is, all the things this family is saying don't really matter because a crime is categorized meaning a certain level. I kind of tend to disagree with that, only based on a judge has discretion. So what you usually don't have discretion for is there's a sentencing range. So if you have a crime like murder in the second degree, the sentencing range is, I think, 123 months to like 220 months. And the vast, vast, vast majority of times, they have to stick within that range. And the range is based on things like the offender score, their history, etc. However, there can be reasons to slide among that scale from the low end to the high end for a judge. And a judge can also impose an exceptional sentence. And that's actually what it's called, an exceptional sentence above the standard range. I've seen it done before, and that can be based on factors that are judicial discretion based on the type of the crime, aspects of the crime. You know, in this case, the way Joshua Ellis treated the body was absolutely horrendous. And so there is room for judicial discretion in cases. Not often exercised, but it exists for a reason. Jeremy Sorensen said, why are judges being politically appointed when they should be unbiased to begin with? Makes absolutely no sense. Now, judges are elected, but if there's a vacancy, it's a political appointment. And then they can run for re-election. The issue is there are stricter rules when it comes to political races for judges, so it's really hard to beat an incumbent. So once you are installed by a politician, the chances are you're just going to be able to stay there. Tara says, how do we fix this broken system? This is absolutely disgusting. How has it come to be that some in society think criminals deserve better than victims, victims and the public deserve better? And look, I believe in the Constitution. I believe in due process. I believe in someone's right to a fair trial, to a speedy trial. I get it. I believe in people's right to a reasonable bail. I'm not just going to pick and choose what aspects of the Constitution I think are important. I think they're all important. However, I do think that, you know, and I also don't believe that justice is always throwing the book at someone to the fullest extent of the law. Just like I said earlier, that there are extenuating circumstances that would warrant a high-end sentence. I think sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that would warrant a low-end sentence. But at the same time, I think when you have a case like this that is so egregious, that touches on all these aspects as a civil society that we pretend to care about, you know, quote unquote, gun violence, domestic violence. And then you throw all that out the window for no reason Again, there's no weaknesses in this case. There's no reason it can't be brought to trial. There is no reason, no legitimate reason to offer someone who did something so horrendous such a light sentence. It doesn't make any sense. And so I think those are the aspects where, again, you've got maybe light on crime prosecutors, light on crime judges, because of a political environment, and all coalesces, and then this is the obvious result, which honestly, this is one of the top reasons why we need a Republican governor for a little bit. We need some good judicial appointments of people who are really law and order to try to combat 12 years of Inslee appointments. All right, on Mayor Bruce Harrell and his comments about the shooting in Seattle, Matthew Cook says, how come I've never heard Mayor Harrell and Chief Diaz, how come I've never heard Mayor Harrell and Chief Diaz have never used the terms knife violence and blunt object violence? How come they've never used those terms? Yeah, I think that's always the age-old question. Lynn says, regarding this shooting this weekend, my heart breaks for the victims and families of those affected. Tragic, really. To answer the mayor on how to stop this is to avidly find and charge to the max those who do these horrific crimes. Have a fully staffed first responder and prosecutor and judges who aren't afraid to prosecute on these crimes. There's no gun control necessary to those who are responsible owners, but to those criminals who don't follow the rules. It's incredible to me that common sense is out for the politicians' sad, sad day. And hi D, says nothing good happens past midnight. Yeah, 4:30 a.m. You're out at a hookah lounge. What do you think is going to happen? I can do a couple more. And Nicole, will you look into, even if I get to it after sanity check, what that super chat was all about? I am not familiar with it. Let me see here. On the presidential race, Mandy says, okay, Brandi, there's no R in the latter part of Ramaswamy. Oh, Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
Am I just adding an R?
You are.
Well, then I've been doing that for months. Ramaswamy. Okay. All right. Maybe I need an R jar for the snort jar, and if I say it wrong, I'll put a little dollar in there. Two people told me that. Mo said Ramaswamy, not Wamy. Okay, I'm sorry. On the show, Two Ladies Midwest Adventure says, Nicole, can you compliment Brandi for some wonderful curls today? Thank you. Working on it. They look fantastic, she says. My hair is getting so long.
It is very long, so you have more to curl down there.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep growing it out after the wedding. We'll see. Wow, it's a whole new me. Okay, well, Nicole digs into the meaning of that super chat, because when you do a super chat, we sure would like to get you a super answer to your super chat. Let us get to our closing sanity check. So I mentioned coming up on the show on Sunday, unless he cancels, don't cancel, Superintendent of Public Instruction Chris Reichdahl. We have so much to talk to you about. We're going to be talking to the head of our public school system about a variety of issues that I see in public education. We'll see how much he also finds them to be issues. But I've got to say, there was this, and thank you, Daniel. I think it was Daniel who sent this to me. Oh, I'm sorry if it wasn't. Maybe Andy sent it to me. Wild story out of Bellingham, the school district. And it just makes me wonder, like, do we have the lowest of the low standards for people who teach our children? Do we have the lowest of the low standards for people who we entrust with our child's care for 5 days a week, for 8-9 months a year? So this is the headline from the Bellingham Herald. Bellingham administrators accused of failing, Nicole, will you pop this up? Bellingham administrators accused of failing to report students' assault reinstated. It reads, at least 2 of 3 Bellingham public school administrators who are facing criminal charges for allegedly failing to report a student's sexual assaults brought to their attention have been reinstated as assistant high school principals. Jeremy Gilbert, Luazo, Megan Dunham, and Maud Hackney were each criminally cited December 7th in Whatcom County District Court with 1 count of failure to report, which is a gross misdemeanor. Gross misdemeanors are punishable by up to 1 year in jail and a $5,000 fine. All 3 have pleaded not guilty in the case. Their jury trial is expected to start August 28th. So these individuals, under the law, are mandatory reporters. So they had a duty to report sexual assault. They had a duty, and what is very gross to me is, yes, they have a duty under the law, but don't you think they also have a moral obligation? Don't you think they have an ounce of common sense to say that we need to report a sexual assault involving a student because that's the right thing to do? Not the legally required thing to do, but that's the right thing to do as an adult who are entrusted with the care of these kids. And to think that you have these 3 individuals, and yes, there's a presumption of innocence, again, innocent until proven guilty, but they're going to be in trial starting August 28th. So you have these individuals who have been reinstated as assistant high school principals who are facing criminal charges related to their conduct as school employees or their lack of action. And they're going to be in a jury trial around the time kids are heading back to school in Washington state. How is that appropriate? How is that sane? And again, they should be on, even if, again, the presumption of innocent until proven guilty, they shouldn't step foot near a school email, do anything related to their job at these schools until they are acquitted. Because the accusations are that serious and that significant. And I go back to this insane world we're living in. We should have the highest standards for the people who are caring for our kids. This is insane. And we will be absolutely covering this case as it proceeds. And obviously, like I said, they're going to be in jury trial 7 days from now. So Nicole, put that on the Monday show sheet for next week so we can see what's happening in Bellingham. Absolutely insane. What is wrong? What is wrong with the Bellingham School District? Nicole, did you get an answer to our super chat?
Yes, I believe I figured it out, but what he was saying, so that person he referenced.
Gary Plausch?
Yeah, so that was a father that killed his son's abuser.
Okay.
Because he went to jail for a couple days, got out, and then they were dealing with him. So
I
it's
see.
Revenge killing.
So Leland said, I guess Pierce County wants a Gary Plausch 2.0, which is if there isn't justice in the criminal justice system, people are going to take matters into their own hands. Thank you. Which I don't want to see. I don't want to see vigilante justice because I don't want to be on the receiving end of vigilante justice, and that is completely contrary to who we are as a country. But look, our criminal justice system is declining by the day, and this is really frustrating stuff and really emotional stuff. And we can't have a system where someone can murder their ex-girlfriend in cold blood and go to prison for 7 years. That doesn't make a bit of sense. All right, Nicole, thank you. Thank all of you for your wonderful comments and questions as always. We will be back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. We've just got really good stuff coming up for you, especially on the Sunday show the next few weeks. We've got good interviews lined up all the way until my wedding day. We've been planning and plotting so I can take a few days off after I'm married. But anyway, if you'd like to become a subscriber to the show, please do so. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. Just $5 a month. We're going to have our merch store up and running very, very soon. We'll let you know when that happens. In the meantime, we will see all of you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. Boop.